What do you think is the next frontier?
So that kind of curtails into what I was going to ask you next, which kind of is a combination of the two thoughts. I had Stowe Boyd on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about moving to the East Coast because he felt like innovation in the Bay Area is under the cloud of failure right now. So innovation isn't really happening. And I always think of two examples to point this out, which is geolocation that everybody talks about. And the two companies that are kind of leading that arguably right now are Foursquare, based in New York, and Gowalla, based in Austin. And then you look at mobile. And we see a lot of applications being developed here, but not, I don't think anybody is particularly happy with AT&T's coverage of Apple's products and their choice of the roadmap they're going at, even though their products may be fantastic. But I'm wondering, kind of a play between the two questions, kind of what your thoughts are on, what's next, is innovation actually happening in this space, or is it more about defining what social media is and what the role is within an organization?
I would say from a corporate B2B level, that's definitely where it's at. I think we're kind of moving towards experiments to an actual organization, actually a real social media group that focuses on it. So that's a trend that's just starting to happen. I know even with Dell having as many social media folks as they do, they're just starting to centralize their team. I've been talking with them. We're starting to do that. So and we're all learning from each other, and we're all trying to, from a corporate perspective, trying to leverage new tools out there to help streamline the process a little bit, make it a little bit easier to manage all these different conversations that are happening. Listening to Olivia for Unit 6, still have, they're as good as they are, still have ways to go. Things like sentiment are really hard to measure. So I think that the tools will continue to improve, and will continue to, the corporations will start adapting more of this as more organic, social.
For me, it's an interesting question because all of these things, Foursquare has an open API. A lot of these different tools have open APIs, and I have to disagree with Stowe. Okay, he's bored because he got this earlier than everybody else, but there's still a lot of innovation out there. To say that there's no innovation is kind of jaded in my opinion. And we're here to talk about how a lot of people still haven't gotten social media. Those of us who've been in it for a long time are kind of bored with it. We're like, okay, what's next? But the real people who are working in business, they aren't bored with it yet. They're still figuring it out. So there is innovation. And I really do think augmented reality is going to be the next thing, that you're not going to be able to walk down the street without being smacked with, so-and-so on Foursquare says you got to go here, but on Gowalla, it can really, I turn it off on my phone sometimes already because you can walk by a store and it'll say, well, you're really close to here, you should go get a massage. It's kind of tempting. So to not want to be tempted, I'm not going to go there, and I turn it off. But I think augmented reality is going to be the next wave of innovation. And where are we going to go with it? What are we going to do with it? How are we going to combine all these networks so that we're not monitoring 20 networks at once? I mean, I saw a great cartoon the other day that it was a guy scanning to get his coffee, and he said, now wait while I check in on Foursquare and Gowalla and Cosworld, and there's so many things that you can do. It's just overwhelming. So we're going to have to find a way to condense that and make it more manageable so that we can actually do business, and find a way to work some of this augmented reality and to actually enhance our lives instead of kind of, add more baggage, which we don't really need.
My crystal ball is broken tonight, so what will be next in social media may be beyond me, but I think what should be next is adoption. So speaking of it to what Janet said is, here we all live in a really interesting, I hate the word bubble, but for lack of a better term right now, that's what it is. I travel around a lot, and I can tell you that, my mom's not a great test market. I'm sure it says that actually. But I do know plenty of people that I've done user surveys and test studies and things like that with, And my mom uses my Trio from 2004 and says it's too difficult. And, I know plenty of people who haven't gotten past understanding email really well and not getting reply all when they say something sensitive. I think, getting to the point where we've made user interfaces and the tools that we have usable and understood by a wide enough audience to need to innovate beyond a lot of what we have, we're really missing the mark and really super specifying to such a small segment of people, to such a very narrow area of the population, as opposed to trying to really reach out and, get that broader grasp. Like you look at the Red Cross, and a lot of the Haiti outreach was text message this number. So the mass audience that people were reaching is still using text message as their primary form. It wasn't just tweet this to everything, right? And Twitter hasn't reached mass adoption. So while we want to say Twitter may be old hat, it's old hat because, that's just what we're used to now. My 12-year-old cousin, is probably light years ahead of where I am, but that doesn't mean we should innovate for him. So I think that a focus on adoption and usability by a more broad segment of the population would be greatly appreciated by most customers and business owners.
Okay, two-pronged. One is to talk about the question, well, I disagree with your animal podcast as well. I'm a San Francisco native, and so I've been hanging out and I've watched both bubbles burst. And I've just been hanging out, watching the whole thing happen, and getting drinks with your developers, and hanging out with the people that clean your carpets, and being in SOMA, and watching it all come and go. And nothing is as awesome as failure in San Francisco, because what it does is it gets rid of people who just don't care. It's true. It's true. The people that show up and just want to punch a clock or just want to make a website so that they can be a social media guru and then make money and move on, failure weeds those people right the fuck out, and it's great. So I'm a big fan of failure, and also something great about failure, if you're going to talk about failure in terms of startups in San Francisco. Right now, there's a significant amount of failure that's floated through here, and there is nothing that makes people hungrier and toothier for success and innovation than the specter of failure. And we're watching that right now. There are some amazing people doing incredible things right now here in San Francisco, and they walk by the Twitter offices and they look up and they go, I'm going to do that, or something like that. And it's a pretty exciting time to be here, so it's not a time to leave, I think. And in terms of what's next, I think that I agree with you, and that we're looking at sort of a long tail with social media and status updates, with things like widespread adoption of Twitter and Foursquare and Gowalla. I think that from what I can tell, at least what I'm seeing in terms of adoption and moving on, things like Facebook that are more locked systems are starting to become a little bit more passé. What Google Buzz is doing is really interesting, but I also have to agree that I think that augmented reality, things like Lair, are really exciting for people, and that's specifically tuned to mobile media. So that's what I'm looking at for cool, interesting future innovations.
Although I have to say, when